Hey, what's going on? Welcome back to the Bring the Sing podcast. I'm your host, The Hammer, and we got a good one for you today. You might also realize if you've listened to any of the previous 14 episodes that I changed up the intro just a little bit, just a slight tweak. It had come to my attention that the yo 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 has already been taken up by a certain Chris Sims of an NBC podcast. So I did not realize that at first, so I'm going to change it from yo 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 to hey. I have all the respect in the world for Chris Sims, so I'm going to let him keep his thing, and we're going to do our own thing. So, hey, what's going on? Anyways, we got a good one for you today. We got the part 3 of the best games of the NFL season. This time we got weeks 13 through 18. We're finishing off the regular season best games. We're going week by week, so let's get into it. We got week 13 right off the bat, and we're starting off with the Thanksgiving games. Week 13 was Thanksgiving, and honestly, this was an awesome Thanksgiving from start to finish. We had the Packers upsetting the Lions 31-24 to kick off the Thanksgiving morning games. We had the Cowboys beating the Chiefs 31-28. Honestly, that was a crazy game too. I was locked in. I was a little food heavy. I was going through the food coma a little bit, but my goodness, man, that game kept me awake better than any caffeine source could ever do because, golly, Dak Prescott and Patrick Mahomes just going back and forth, shot for shot. It was a shootout. It was awesome. This was definitely one of my favorite games of the year, and I was watching it with some of my people that don't really watch football. So, just hearing them as we're eating Thanksgiving, I was hearing them talking about football, and it was like, there's a lot of things that I could say to you right now but I don't want to come off as crass. I don't want to come off as like a know-it-all. I don't want to come off as somebody who is impolite, especially on Thanksgiving. So I was like, I'm just gonna let you have your own opinions, and if you ask me a question, I'll answer it. But for the most part, I'm just gonna let you have your own opinions. I'm not gonna get into any fights. So I'm not gonna get any arguments. It's Thanksgiving at the end of the day, So yeah, it was kind of interesting watching, and some of them were Chiefs fans too. So that was pretty funny. But anytime the Chiefs lose, especially on a national holiday, if you guys don't know this, Thanksgiving is like one of my favorite holidays, if not my favorite American holiday. You got food, you got family, you got football, the 3 F's. It's just it's the best. You got you eat food that you don't really have pretty much all year long, and then you get to watch football all day long. It's like what better way to spend Thanksgiving? It's awesome. You get the day off from work, like it's a good time. And then at the end of the night, you had the Bengals beating the Ravens 32-14. Honestly, not that great of a game, but the Bengals were kind of struggling at this point, and the Ravens kind of were surging back from their woes after Lamar was injured, and Lamar came back, and the Bengals were also getting Joe Burrow back, so it was looking to be a great game, but the Bengals ended up beating them in quite handedly, and it never really felt like it was a blowout. It kind of felt like the Ravens could just pick it up and go at any time, but for the most part, the Ravens didn't really do that, and up until 5 minutes left, it was like, okay, yeah, I didn't realize there's not a lot of time left. This one's pretty much over. So, yeah, and then we had the Black Friday game the next day, where speaking of the upsets, you had the Bears going into Philadelphia and beating the Philadelphia Eagles 24-15, and that was kind of like the marquee win for the Bears. That was when we kind of realized, okay, the Bears are for real this season, because that was not a game that anybody expected the Bears to win except for very few, and the Bears ended up going in. It was an awesome start to the week. It was definitely like a week full of upsets, and and it kind of continued. The trend kind of continued into Sunday as the Panthers beat the Rams 31-28 in Carolina. I think Matt Stafford had 3 turnovers. I think 2 picks. He threw a pick 6. Like it was. At this point, he was looking like the prime MVP candidate. I mean, he did win MVP at the end of the year, but he was looking like the runaway MVP, and then he had a glitch like this. It was like, okay, maybe this MVP race is a little closer than it is. And then the Rams were also looking like the heavy favorites up until this game. This game was kind of the game that derailed their season, and it's crazy looking back because hindsight is 20/20. But this was an awesome game, and I just remember texting my group chat, and everybody was going crazy like, like, how are the Panthers winning? How are the Panthers winning? It's like, well, newsflash, the Panthers are a lot better than the previous year's Panthers or the even 2 years ago's Panthers, you know? So that was an awesome game. I love seeing the upsets. And then speaking of upsets, we also had the Texans beating the Colts 20-16 in Indianapolis. There was a couple of missed calls or weird calls by the refs in this game, but for the most part, you know, the Texans took care of business. And, you know, this is where the Colts, they were 8-3 going into this game. They were still holding the spot for the number one seed, or not the number one seed. They were still holding the ranks for the number one spot in the AFC South, I should say, up until this game. So once this game happened, it was like, okay, the Colts season is probably done by now, you know, like they're not the same Colts that we looked at the first half of the season, you know. So seeing them lose to the Texans and, you know, losing 3 out of the last 4 games for them in the second half of the season, it was like, okay, you know, the writing is on the wall. These guys are pretty much Dunsky. Then you had the Jets getting their 3rd win of the season against the Falcons, which is absolutely insane to me. They beat them 27-24. This was Kirk Cousins' first start, I believe, after the gruesome Michael Penix injury. And the Jets ended up upsetting the Falcons to continue the upset week. And what's crazy about this game is if the Falcons had just beaten the lowly Jets, they would have won their division and made the playoffs, because there was a 3-way tie for 8-9 for the NFC South at the end of the season. And the Falcons did not have that 3-way tiebreaker, so they did not end up making the playoffs, and they ended up 8-9, of course. So it's like, if they won this game and they made it to 9-8, wow, like that entire season just looks so much different. The entire offseason looks so much different. You probably don't even fire Raheem Morris. Like, it's just this is insane. It's like one of those domino effect, butterfly effect kind of moments where you look back and you're like, wow, like this loss pretty much ended your guys' season. Like that was crazy. Then you had the Bucks barely eking it out against the Cardinals 20-17. This is also where the writing was on the wall. Like, okay, the Bucks are not that good. This is you know, we might, even though they won, you might want to hit the panic button, you know. And then the afternoon games, there wasn't a whole lot of games. There wasn't a whole lot of good games. They were all multiple possession games. The Bills beat the Steelers handily in Pittsburgh 26-7. This was the game where the Steelers fans were chanting, "Fire Tomlin, fire Tomlin." You know, they were booing during Renegades. So this was kind of like the beginning of the end for the Mike Tomlin era Steelers. The other games, I mean, you had Max Brosmer's first start ever in Seattle against the eventual Super Bowl winning champion Seattle Seahawks, and they lost so bad, 26-0. They put up 0 points. Actually, Max Brosmer did put up some points, but it was for the other team when he threw one of the worst pick sixes that I think I've ever seen in a professional football setting. Like, it was just that it was awful. It's like pretty much you could write down everything not to do as a quarterback, and that's it. Pretty much just described Max Brosmer's first start as a pro quarterback. So moving on to Sunday Night Football, this was probably one of the best games of the entire weekend. You had the Broncos going into Washington and playing against the Washington Commanders in a game that was a lot closer than it should have been, as the Broncos barely eked out the W in Washington 27-26 off of a blocked 2-point conversion by none other than Nick Bonito. So, you know, that was that game definitely took a lot of years off of my life. And, you know, that was kind of the trend. Week by week, it was like a win is a win is a win is a win. But my goodness, man, it was like every single week it was like, wow, like, are the Broncos bad? Or, you know, I mean, they keep winning these games, but, you know, it's like, man, every single game is just close. It's like, this is not good, you know. But this game, from a pure football fan perspective, was an awesome game. You know, we had Marcus Mariota playing like prime Marcus Mariota. We had a great one-handed catch in the back of the end zone by a guy that I can't even remember his name now. He got signed midway through the season. So it's like, yeah, those free agents that you sign midway through the season, you know, it's like usually they don't really pan out. But, you know, this guy just made one of the best plays that I've ever seen from a wide receiver standpoint with that one-handed catch in the back of the end zone. Even OBJ was tweeting about it like, wait, this kind of reminds me of something, you know. So, you know, that game, definitely one of the best games of the year. We had Bo Nix throwing a absolute dime with his knee. Like, 1 foot, or not 1 foot, like 1 inch off of the ground. He threw a touchdown to Cortland Sutton. And, like I said, 1 inch. He was 1 inch away from being sacked, and he threw an absolute masterpiece to Cortland Sutton in the end zone. And I think that's what kind of put him on the map, like with all the like ESPN guys and all that. Like, wow, this kid actually has a lot of talent. And when you make a play like that in prime time, it's like, yeah, you definitely open the eyes of those casuals in the East Coast that don't really watch the West Coast games or the Central games or anything like that. They just pay attention to the Patriots and the Eagles and stuff like that. So when you make plays like that, you definitely make nationwide headlines. Now, it didn't help that he had one of the worst interceptions that he threw all season long, also in prime time when he threw it straight to Bobby Wagner. But what can you do? This was an awesome game, and like I said, a win is a win is a win is a win. So that's all for Week 13. We're moving on to Week 14. Now, Week 14, we had a awesome shootout. Thursday Night Football, Lions versus Cowboys in Detroit, where the Lions took care of business 44-30. These teams both played the previous Thursday, so they had a full 7 days of rest going into this game. And my goodness, this was crazy, because it was like whoever wins this game is still in contention for the playoffs, and whoever loses this game, their season is pretty much over. I was looking at all the advanced stats, and it was like, if you lose this game, you got like a 2 or 3% chance of making the playoffs. And sure enough, the Cowboys ended up losing because their defense could not stop a nosebleed all season long. But my goodness, man, what an NFL season. I'm just thinking about this game, and it's like, this is not even like in the top 10 best NFL games this year. But just thinking about this game, it's like, man, what a great game. And like for the fact that it's like not even like in the top 10 best games of the season, and like I can still look back at this and be like, wow, that was an awesome game. Like that, I mean, both of these teams eventually did not end up making the playoffs, but going into this game, like the stakes were high for both teams. Moving on to the Sunday games, we had the Steelers playing against the Ravens in Baltimore, in which the Steelers ended up winning 27-22 in one of the most controversial victories I think I've ever seen in my entire life. The Steelers got three helpful/beneficial calls from the refs in this game, in which one of them was like Isaiah Likely catching a ball in the end zone with like 20 seconds to go, which would have won them the game, and he gets 2 feet, and then he extends the ball so that way he doesn't get it like ripped out, and eventually it does get ripped out. But they said since he didn't take 3 steps, that he did not maintain possession of the ball, and it was an incomplete pass, which was absolute absurdity. If you ask me, he definitely makes a football move. All you need is just 2 steps in a football move when you're catching the football and you're going to the ground. But he took 2 steps, and then he extended the ball out over the goal line, and to keep it away from the defender from ripping it out of his arms, and they did not consider that extending of the football a football move. Even when you search up what a football move is in the NFL rulebook, you will see that it is absolutely considered a football move if you make a move common to the game. And extending the football is a 100% a football move that is common to the game. So, and then not only that, there was also earlier, I think in like the third quarter, there was a pass by Aaron Rodgers in which he passed it, caught it, and then he took a knee, and they said that he was down by contact, and like after the Baltimore Ravens ripped the ball out of his arms for, I believe, an interception, they ripped it out of his hands, and then they said it was an incomplete pass or something like that. Like it was crazy. It was like, wait a second, like either it's a completed pass for a sack or it's interception, how, like, and either way, the memory is a little fuzzy. I'll have to go back and actually, look at the play. But there was 3 calls that completely hosed the Ravens in the Steelers' favor. So it's like that one, I don't believe necessarily the NFL is rigged, but that one, it was like they definitely wanted the the Ravens to lose that game, or at least the Steelers to win that game. I don't know. That one was really bad. Then we had the Titans going into Cleveland and facing the Browns. And I know what you're thinking, like, how are we talking on Bring the Sink? How are we talking about the Titans and Browns? But no, this was Shedeur versus Cam Ward, the two quarterbacks from the 2025 NFL draft going up against each other. And the final score was 31-29. You know, the Titans defense actually showed up. They made Shedeur kind of struggle at times here and there, but for the most part, you know, Shedeur and Cam Ward were kind of going shot for shot a little bit, and ultimately, I do believe that Shedeur played the better game out of the two. You know, he definitely had the better stats, and you know, Cam Ward. You know, I will say Cam Ward hasn't had a great team this year, but in this game specifically, his team helped him out a lot more than the Cleveland Browns team helped out Shedeur Sanders in this one. So it was awesome to see. This was going to be their first matchup of hopefully many. You know, I like both of those guys, but it was definitely good. It was a rainy football game. This was just classic football. You know, we also had Tyler Shough, man. Tyler Shough with the New Orleans Saints going into Tampa and beating the Bucs 24-20. And I remember this game specifically because I had an eliminator challenge going all the way up until week 14, and the Bucs were my last eliminator team still alive. I picked the Bucs to beat the Saints. And if you're not familiar with eliminator, pretty much you pick a team every single week, and if that team wins, then you can't pick that team anymore for the rest of the season. And the next week you have to pick another, like, quote unquote guaranteed winner, and you have to survive each and every week. So I got one that survived all the way until week 14, which rarely ever happens. I got one till week 14, and you know, my choices, I have already picked 13 teams, so my choices were kind of getting a little slim. And I was looking at the Bucs and the Saints, and I was like, oh, you know, the Bucs need to get back on track. You know, they're 7-5. The Saints are 2-10. You know, they're facing a rookie quarterback, and they're playing at home. You know, give me Baker and the Bucs beating the Saints. But no, Tyler Shough was like, absolutely not, and he carried them. He carried them to beat the Bucs 24-20, and he pretty much iced the game because at the end of the game there was like 2 minutes left, and they needed to make a stop. The Bucs defense needed to make a stop, and Tyler Shough, he like broke a tackle. He ran like a naked bootleg, broke a tackle, ran for 10 yards, got the first down, and pretty much iced the game. So it's like, man, that's how my eliminator season ended. So it was definitely a pretty tragic way, but you know, at the end of the day, I like me some Tyler Shough. I like what they got going on. I like what they got building over in New Orleans. So that was pretty cool to see. Then we had one of the best games of the entire year. You know how I mentioned that, you know, some games aren't going to make the top 10. This game, I don't even know if I'm going to make a quote-unquote top 10, but this game's definitely in the top 10, if not the top 5. This is the Bengals going into Buffalo and playing against the Buffalo Bills, in which the Bills beat them 39-34 in a snowy Orchard Park. This was a classic football game. You had everything. You had the great quarterbacks, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen. You had the snow. It was a blizzard. It was like a whole foot of snow. You know, it was. We had the comeback. You know, where I think there was like 34-21 or something like that. Hold on. I'll check right now. Yeah, so in the fourth quarter, we had the Bengals scoring a touchdown to go up 28-18 until the Bills got a touchdown off of a 1-minute drive, got another touchdown 2 minutes later off of a pick six, which Joe Burrow rarely ever throws, and then the Bills get the ball back after another turnover, and the Bills score another touchdown. So they went from 18-39 in the matter of 5 total game minutes. Like, it was crazy. And then the Bengals ended up getting a touchdown at the end, with a little over 2 minutes to go, in which their 2-point conversion failed to make it 39-34. You know, this was an awesome game. Anytime you have a combined, you know, 73 points, it's like this is a game that I'll definitely watch for years to come. This is, you know, and going into this game, I think we all kind of knew that this was like must-watch television because my goodness, Joe Burrow and Josh Allen, like that's just one of those legendary matchups where it's like, okay, both of these guys are at the top of their class, top of their peers, just like the upper echelon guys, and they come in and it's 39-34 shootout in the snow. The snow is supposed to make you not score any points. Like we saw the Patriots and the Broncos in the AFC Championship where it was snowing in the second half and no team scored any points. It was 10-7. So seeing them score 73 combined points in the snow, it's like and the snow too. It's like that is such a lovely view, just watching guys just pounding each other in the snow. Like it's awesome, man. Like there's nothing more football than that, So we also had the Packers beating the Bears 28-21 in their only victory over the Packers this year. We'll get to the next matchup here soon, but the Packers, after Caleb Williams tries to work his fourth quarter magic again in the last drive, and he ends up throwing a pick in the end zone off of a play action pass. That was definitely a great game. This was in the afternoon slate, and honestly probably the best game of the afternoon slate. And then we had the Texans beating the Chiefs and pretty much ending the Chiefs season, forcing them to go 6-7. But yeah, we had the Texans beating the Chiefs on Sunday Night Football 20-10, in which Andy Reid actually went for it on 4th and 1 inside of like 5 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, after no team could score any points, in which the Texans stopped them, as the Texans usually do because of how crazy that Texans defense is, and they ended up ultimately pulling it out for a victory, a road victory. I believe that was DeMeco Ryans' first ever road victory over the Kansas City Chiefs, so it was nice to get that burden lifted off of his shoulders. Definitely a great game. I know the scoreboard doesn't really look like it, but that was definitely a game that I was glued to my seat, because anytime you got the Chiefs playing on Sunday Night Football, that's a legendary hate watch. You're just watching, you're like, please lose, please lose, please lose, so it was awesome to see the Texans take care of business in that one. Then next day we had Monday Night Football, and I remember this one specifically because we went on a little double date, and my friend, this was, I'm pretty sure I took out my friend for his birthday. His birthday was like a month prior, but we finally, we're just so busy, me and him, that we finally were able to get together, and we went to a seafood boil. We were watching this game while digging in on some crab legs and some shrimp and what have you, and it was awesome. But we were watching the Eagles playing against the Chargers in LA, and the Chargers ultimately pulled it out 22-19, and I couldn't believe that this was the game. This was the game where, if you guys remember, Jalen Hurts throws an interception. The intercepting player fumbles the football back to Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts recovers the fumble, runs for a couple of yards, and then fumbles himself. That was the first time I think I've ever seen that in my life, where a player turned the ball over twice in one play. And, I don't know if there's even something where I could even track that, where I could, maybe I could try Google. Let's see if Google will tell me if a player has ever turned the ball over twice in one matchup. Hold on. Stand by. All right, it looks like Google came back to me and said Jalen Hurts is the only player in NFL history to turn the ball over twice on the same play. Wow, that was crazy. It's like, that's a game that you'll remember for the rest of your life just because of that, and that's kind of the wrong side of history. I feel like I'm kind of harsh on Jalen Hurts sometimes, but my goodness, man, it's like, and that's honestly the only thing I really remember from this game. I know Saquon broke a long touchdown run at some point, but I really needed the Chargers to lose in this matchup because I wanted to secure the AFC West. Obviously, the Broncos ended up getting the number 1 seed. It was just a little harder of a path to do it. I wanted to rest some starters, and get healthy for the divisional round, which was ultimately Buffalo. But it's like maybe it was for the best because you don't want to take too much time off either. So maybe it was good that the Chargers ended up winning this one anyways. Moving on to Week 15. Gosh, I can't believe we're almost at the end of the season. We had the Falcons coming back and beating the Buccaneers after being down 28-14 on Thursday Night Football. They came back in Tampa and beat the Bucks 29-28 with Kirk Cousins. This was the Kyle Pitts legacy game, man. He had 40 fantasy points for basic PPR purposes, 40 fantasy points, and he's becoming a free agent, so, he needed to have one of these games like this so that way he could get paid somewhere else or by the Atlanta Falcons. But my goodness, man, like this was an awesome game. This was the game where I really thought Todd Bowles was going to get fired, but I guess he's going to get another shot. But at this point, I was like, when I watched this game and the game had ended, this was the game where I realized, man, like Todd Bowles has a 0% chance of returning, and the fact that he is returning was crazy because there at no point should the Falcons have come back and actually beaten the Bucks. They had gotten 3 possessions in the fourth quarter in which they scored either a field goal or a touchdown in those 3 straight possessions in order to make this comeback. And the Bucks could not get anything going on offense in the fourth quarter. So it's like, they're not playing inspired football. They're not playing great football. This is not a team that is coached well right now. They're getting outcoached every single week, and this was definitely one of the games where they were getting outcoached. But my goodness, this was one of those games. This one I actually might have to put in the top 10. This was an awesome game. This was a game that I wasn't really even looking forward to during the week. I was like, oh, who's playing Thursday? Falcons, Bucks? Psh, nah, who cares? It's not even Penix. It's Kirk Cousins. But boy, was I wrong about that one because this was definitely one of the best games of the NFL season. Then moving on to the Sunday slate, we had some bummers in this game, man. Or we had some bummers in this slate, man. We had a lot of blowouts. The Bears, beating the brakes off the Browns. We had the Ravens beating the brakes off the Bengals. We had Texans beating the Cardinals 40-20. The Jags beating the Jets 48-20. I mean, we had the Chargers beating the Chiefs 16-13 and ultimately ending the Chiefs season. That was the game that that Patrick Mahomes ended up tearing his ACL and kind of putting the final nail in the coffin for the Kansas City Chiefs. But definitely the best game of this early morning slate, the best possible game, was the Bills going into New England and beating the New England Patriots 35-31. Now, this was another legendary comeback in which the Patriots were winning 21-0, and I believe it was like 24-7 going into the half. But yeah, at one point they were up 21-0, and the Bills just came back and scored 35 points and beat the Patriots 35-31. This was the game where I was kind of raising some question marks, kind of raising my eyebrows at Drake May. Like, is this guy? I mean, I know he's still young, but I was like, is this guy? Does he have the clutch gene? He's definitely not no Tom Brady. He's always going to be in Tom Brady's shadow, unfortunately, until he also wins 7 Super Bowls, which is kind of borderline impossible by today's standards. But yeah, at this point, I was like, man, you see these guys in that 2024 draft class, Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix and Caleb Williams. And, Caleb Williams and Bo Nix this year, say what you want about their actual, play throughout the games, but, in, the last 5 minutes, last 3 minutes of the game, last 2 minutes, they turn it up. They get ice in their veins. They're clutch, Both Bo Nix and Caleb Williams, they both had, 6 or 7 game-winning or game-tying drives in the fourth quarter or overtime. So, when I saw that Drake May was put in this position and he couldn't get the job done, it's like it definitely kind of raised my eyebrows about him. Like, this is interesting, So that was kind of the initial point that it took, and then once I seen him playing in the playoffs and I saw Drake May just absolutely struggle. Now, granted, he did play against some behemoths of a defense week after week after week, all the way up until and including the Super Bowl. It's like, wow, okay, so this guy is still kind of raw. He still has a lot to develop, and I'm sure that he will develop, but, we got to pump the brakes on this kid, and this was kind of the game that showed me that we had to do that. We also had the Green Bay Packers, coming into Denver and facing it off against the Denver Broncos, and this was the game I was extremely, extremely nervous about because the Packers were really good. They were looking like Super Bowl contenders going into the season, especially after that trade for Micah Parsons, and going into this, the Broncos were losing by over 10 points going into halftime, and things were not looking good. But sure enough, in the second half, the Broncos picked things up, and they shout out to Bo Nix. He started becoming clutch, and he started doing his clutch thing. And this game, man, like this game was so awesome. And I had all my boys coming over. We watched this game. My best friend of over 15 years, he's a Packers fan, and I had him over, and he was like dancing and laughing, like, oh, let's go, Packers are winning, and even though he's a bit of a pessimist, but he was like feeling pretty good up until the third quarter, and this was also the game that Micah Parsons tore his ACL. Unfortunately, that was pretty tragic. But this was kind of awesome, just seeing the Broncos coming back, especially against a good team, and putting up good points, or putting up a lot of points against a good defense, and beating a good team, and then seeing my buddy just getting absolutely like drowned in his like football depression after accepting the fact that he just lost the Denver Broncos. So this was definitely one of my favorite games of the season. This was one of Bo Nix's best performances of the season as well. So this game, I'll definitely remember this game for years to come, especially as a Broncos fan. Now, as a football fan, a game that I'll remember for years to come is the Rams beating the Lions 41 to 34 in LA in SoFi. My goodness, this was a shootout, man. This was this game was going on at the same time that the Packers and Broncos were playing, and it's like I didn't know which TV to look at some points. It's like obviously I'm a Broncos fan, but like this game was going crazy. The Lions came out to a lead early on, and then the Rams just started piling it on. And then the Lions started surging back a little bit. This was definitely a crazy game. We also had, speaking of Tyler Shough, we had the Saints beating the Panthers 20-17. The Saints were just trying to ruin everybody's season towards the end, especially with Tyler Shough, man. Like he was coming in and he was just shucking it all up for everybody. We also had, oh man, this was a crazy time. Remember this? We had the Seahawks barely beating the Colts 18-16, and if you remember specifically who the quarterback was for the Indianapolis Colts, it was none other than Phillip Rivers. After being retired for like 4.8 years, he renewed his insurance for him and his entire family and came back and had to hit reset on the Hall of Fame meter. And now we won't even see him for another 5 years. But honestly, shout out to Phillip Rivers, man. What an absolute legend. He came in, he tossed some touchdowns. You knew that he couldn't toss any farther than 20 yards. But, this was his first ever start after 4.5 years or so. And, you could see it, man. He was heavy. He couldn't throw the ball down the field. The ball took forever to get there. It's like he just came in, he tossed some touchdowns, he ran with the boys, hit a little cardio. He didn't win any games, but he had some fun with his boys. He showed his kids that he could still do it, and then he retired again. Like, what an absolute legend. Shout out to Phillip Rivers, man. Now, looking over the rest of these games, I might have to move forward to week 16 because there's not a lot of games that really caught my eye after that. But speaking of catching my eye, we had another game that is in the contention for top 10 best games of the season, with the Seahawks winning against the Rams 38-37. Now, this game is a game that I have referenced on this podcast at least 4 or 5 different times throughout all these different episodes. Like, this was such a legendary game, man. I went out to a sports bar with some of my cousins, and we watched this game, man. This was an awesome game, man. There was also a Nuggets game going on. I promise you, I did not watch a single play from that Nuggets game, man. Like, this Seahawks-Rams game was crazy. And the fact that they were up like 30-14. They being the Rams, they were up 30-14 in the second half, and the Seahawks had come back and beaten them. Not only that, the Rams, they went to overtime. It was 30-30. They went to overtime. The Rams got the ball. They scored a touchdown. They were up 37-30. The Seahawks got the ball back. They scored a touchdown, and then they went for 2 and ended up winning, making the Rams the first ever team to lose in overtime after scoring a touchdown. Isn't that bizarre? I just love stats like that, man. So seeing that, we had the Rashid Shaheed punt return for a touchdown. Honestly, this is a contender for like top 3, top 2 games of the year. This was one of the best, if not the best game of the 2025 season, man. Like, absolute beautiful, beautiful football match. Just classic, elegant, and we also had one of the most bizarre recoveries of a fumble / 2-point conversions that I think I've ever seen, to the point where I actually had to look it up in the rule book to see, like, is this even allowed? Because if you remember, on fourth down, you're not allowed to advance any fumbles, but since I believe the rule was only the fumbling player can advance the fumble. I believe since it was the fumbling player who recovered the ball, or maybe since they recovered the ball in the end zone and it wasn't necessarily advanced, it was already in the end zone. I truly can't even remember right now, but at some point there was like one small niche caveat to the rule that made it okay, made it acceptable, because let's give you some actual context here. The audience is just hearing me blabbering on about this like conversion rule about advancing fourth down fumbles. They don't even know what's going on unless you have a keen memory. But so Sam Darnold had tossed a backwards pass to Kenneth Walker, and it ended up bouncing off of his, or maybe, yeah, no, I think it bounced off of a player's hand or something, landed in the end zone, and then Kenneth Walker just picked up the ball nonchalantly just to hand back to a referee. And when he picked the ball up, nobody really thought much of it. They just thought it was an incomplete pass, because it was one of those kind of parallel passes where you didn't know if it went forward or not. So he picked the ball up, handed it back to the ref. All of a sudden, I didn't even get audio in this sports bar about what was going on. All of a sudden, I see play is under review, and I was like, I thought it was incomplete. What do you mean play is under review? And then I realized, oh, wait, this might be a backwards pass. And sure enough, it was. So great catch by the refs. Obviously, we give the refs a lot of slack for their missed calls or their egregious calls, but this was a fantastic call, and it was the correct call to make. So shout out to the refs for making that, and then, shout out to the Seahawks for coming back and beating the Seahawks beating the Rams and giving us probably one of the best games of 2025. This was an awesome game, man. And then speaking of division rivals, we had the Bears going up against the Packers, in which the Bears beat the Packers 22-16, and this was the Malik Willis game where I really thought that Malik Willis was going to do it, man. And sure enough, he was doing it for a while, up until like 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter, in which the Bears scored a touchdown. They were down multiple possessions. I think it was 16-6 at one point. They were down multiple possessions. They scored a touchdown. They recovered the onside kick, scored a field goal, tied the game up, went to overtime, 16-16. The Packers got the ball. They stalled out with Malik Willis. The Bears got the ball back. Next score wins, and Caleb Williams throws an absolute missile to G.J. Moore in the back of the end zone, to the point where he made such a great catch, I didn't even know he caught it at first. I thought it bounced off the ground, but sure enough, at no point did the ball ever touch the ground. It was one of the best game-winning passes I think I've ever seen. It was 50 air yards, just right on the money. Caleb Williams has not been the most accurate he has not been the most accurate quarterback this year, but man, that was an absolute pill, man. That was a dime, an FDR, if you will. That was beautiful, man. So definitely. And the thing is, I wanted the Packers to win this game, because I've always kind of had a soft spot for the Packers, and I have a buddy who's a Bears fan, so it's I kind of wanted to rub it into his face that they lost, but sure enough, they did not lose. So I sat there in silence for a couple of minutes, wow, I can't believe that just happened. Did we just watch that? That was crazy. Definitely one of the best games of the week. Then moving on to the Sunday slate, we had the Panthers beating the Bucks 23-20, continuing the Bucks slide. But this was honestly one of the most meaningless victories, or one of the most meaningless games, because in a couple of weeks they were going to have to rematch anyways. So it was the loser of this game did not have to face too many consequences besides, all right, you're going to have to win in a couple of weeks. But since the Falcons ended up going on a late season surge, this game actually was consequential, because the Falcons, Bucks, and Panthers all had a 3-way tie. So this game was definitely more now, I don't think anybody on earth really thought that was going to be the case, especially since the Falcons had to play the Rams, and I'm sure we're going to cover that here in a second, but And nobody thought that the Falcons were going to beat the Rams, but sure enough, they did. So this game was actually a lot more consequential than it actually appeared to be. We also had the Steelers beating the Lions 29-24 in Detroit, ultimately putting another nail in the coffin in Detroit's season. I couldn't believe they even lost this game. I couldn't believe that the Steelers won this game. You know, it's like this is when you kind of realize that the Lions had a lot of problems and a lot of problems that they're going to have to focus on in the offseason, because this was not a fix that could just happen overnight. And if it was a fix that you could happen overnight, it would have happened. But since it didn't happen, it was like this is more of a foundational issue. So this was also the game where DK Metcalf got into a fight with a fan and punched a fan in the face, and he got suspended for the last 2 games of the season. So this was also the game where at the end of the game, like 5 seconds left, the Lions were driving down the field. They were within like 10 yards or so. Jared Goff throws pass to Amon-Ra St. Brown. Amon-Ra St. Brown laterals it after, sitting there for for 5 seconds. I couldn't believe they didn't even call any forward progress. He sat there for like 5 seconds, laterals it to another player. That player ends up diving into the end zone. And then the refs have to sit there for like 30 seconds and try to decipher what just happened. And they're sitting there, and they made one of the most disappointing calls to a home stadium that I think I've ever heard in my life. They were like, the ruling on the field is a touchdown. And the crowd erupted, man. They were like, yeah. And like you could hear like the camera, or you could see like the camera shaking. And they're like, however, pass interference, offense, number 14. It's like, oh. So it's like, man, it's like, why did you have to tell us it was a touchdown? It's like you could have just led with pass interference, So that was crazy. They definitely got hosed for that. This was also one of the few weeks that the Broncos ended up losing. They lost to the Jacksonville Jaguars 34-20, and that was probably one of Bo Nix's worst starts as a Bronco, or in his entire career, really. I know we had his first ever starts against the Steelers and the Seahawks, in which he did not look great at all. But this one, after showing us how good he is, and then laying a goose egg like this was definitely a forgettable week for Broncos fans. So just had to talk about that for a second. Sunday Night Football, we had the Patriots going up against the Ravens in Baltimore, and this was another game. It was 24-14, and the Patriots ended up coming back and beating them 28-24. This was a game in which Lamar Jackson got injured, and then Tyler Huntley ended up coming in. So, anytime a quarterback gets injured midway, and you have to you have to play your backup, it's like, does this game really count? But obviously that sucked. You want to play at your strongest, and if you're a Patriots fan, it's like you want to beat the other team at their strongest too, so, or at least you hope. So this game, it definitely kind of disappointed me, even though it ended up being a great game, but it definitely kind of disappointed me in which we couldn't see them facing off fully healthy. Excuse me. Now, moving on to Week 17. Gosh, we're almost there. Going up to Week 17, we had 3 Christmas Day games, and all of which were pretty forgettable, man. Like we had the Cowboys beating the Commanders 30-23. Not really much to say about that game. We had the Vikings 100% ending the Lions season in an outcome that I don't think anybody really saw, with Max Brosmer barely passing for any yards at all and beating the Lions 23-10, ultimately ending their season, putting the final nail in the coffin. And it wasn't the most entertaining game, but it was like, wow, like anytime you see a upset of that magnitude, it's like, wow, this is pretty wild. We also had the Broncos on Thursday Night Football, the final Thursday Night Football of the season, beating the Chiefs with Chris Olajuwon, 20-13. This was another game where it's like, this is a little too close for comfort. This game, it was like the Broncos were kind of controlling the tempo the entire time. Obviously, there was some missed execution. They dropped a couple touchdowns. They threw a kind of a fluky pick. So this was like they pretty much had 3 scoring drives of over 8 or 9 minutes apiece. So it's like anytime that happens multiple times, you're pretty much doing and getting away with whatever you wanted. That I didn't really buy much stock into how good or how bad the Broncos were playing. Because at the end of the day, a win is a win is a win is a win. Now the Saturday games, we had the Texans going up against the Chargers, in which the Texans ended up beating the Chargers 20-16. This is a game where it was actually kind of weird. Cameron Dicker, the kicker, missed 2 kicks, 2 very makeable kicks inside of a dome in a fashion that I don't think we've ever seen before. Dicker the kicker has been such money, man. Like he's been one of the most accurate kickers in the entire league over the last couple of years. So seeing him miss these couple of kicks, and ultimately losing the Chargers this game, and ultimately losing the AFC West title in this game, it's like, wow, that was very uncharacteristic of him. But this was it wasn't like the best game, but it was definitely entertaining at times. I met up with one of my boys at another sports bar to watch this game, and it was pretty solid. We also, moving on to the Sunday slate, we also had Shedeur Sanders and the Browns beating the Steelers 13-6, and this was just the most Steelers thing ever. You see them beating the Lions in Detroit the previous week and then losing to the Browns the next week. It's like, obviously you can never trust those division rivals, but man, it's like this was definitely one of the most defensive matchups I think I've ever seen. And they didn't have any DK Metcalf, so Rodgers kind of looked a little lost out there. He didn't know who to throw to. He was throwing these jump balls to players who should not be receiving jump balls, so that was pretty crazy. You also had the Jaguars beating the Colts 23-17, and I'm not going to lie, this was, from what I remember, this was a good game. I just don't really remember anything that happened in this game. I could probably guess that a Parker Washington touchdown happened at some point, but I really don't remember a whole lot about this game. I do remember, however, the Dolphins upsetting the Buccaneers and making their push for the playoffs a little harder. The Tampa's push for the playoffs a little harder because I think everybody on earth, me included, expected the Bucs to take care of business against the Dolphins, and the Dolphins had something to say. So that was pretty crazy. This is I don't want to say this is like a top 10 game, but this was definitely one of the crazier upsets of the entire year for sure. Speaking of Tyler Shough, we had the Saints beating the Titans 34-26. Earning Tyler Shough's 4th win in 6 total starts. It's like, wow, maybe they should have been starting this guy from the beginning. Like, this guy is really good, So shout out to Tyler Shough, man. I definitely loved watching that guy play all season long. We had the Eagles beating the Bills in one of the most boring games I think I've ever seen, 13-12. I'm pretty sure it was 13-0. But then the Bills scored a touchdown, missed the extra point. And then scored another touchdown, missed the 2-point conversion off of a very, very, very uncharacteristic throw by Josh Allen. Josh Allen doesn't usually miss those throws. The guy was wide open, and like I said, he doesn't really miss those throws, but this was probably one of the worst times to miss a throw like that. So, unfortunate because I like Josh Allen, but, that one ended up clinching the AFC East title for the New England Patriots from them losing this game. So that was that was pretty wild for sure. That was also the game in which Jalen Hurts did not complete a single pass in the second half of a ball game. And it's crazy. It's like, when's the last time you've ever seen a team win a game after their quarterback did not complete a second half pass? Like, isn't that extraordinary? That doesn't really matter anymore, but that's just something that I had to interject right then and there. Now, these next 2 games, these primetime games of Week 17, were feeding generations, man. Like, these were awesome games. We had the Bears going up against the 49ers, in which the 49ers barely eked out a victory, 42-38, in an absolute shootout, in which in the last possession of the game, on the last play of the game, the Bears got all the way down to like the 6-yard line, and they could not end up converting to score a touchdown and winning the game. So giving the 49ers the victory, and it was an awesome game. They were going shot for shot. Brock Purdy and Caleb Williams, they were both going crazy. They were both loading up the stat sheets. Like this was definitely a game to remember for sure. This one actually might make it on the top 10 for sure. And when I say top 10, I'm not like actually making a like top 10 like best games. I think that's too subjective. But it's like just seeing these games, it's like, oh, was that one of the best games of the year? Absolutely. Okay, so it's going on my hypothetical top 10s. Keyword hypothetical right there. And then we also had on Monday Night Football, we had the Rams going into Atlanta facing off against the Atlanta Falcons, in which the Atlanta Falcons shocked the entire world in the Rams 27-24 and making life a lot harder for the Tampa Bay Bucks because of that three-way tiebreaker that I had mentioned earlier. Now, there was a moment at the end of this game where the Rams were trying to get into field goal range and they tossed it to Puka Nacua. Stafford did, and Puka Nacua almost made one of the greatest catches of all time on the sideline with a tiptoe catch, but he did not get control of the ball while he had those 2 feet in bounds. So it's like, man, if the sideline was like 2 inches bigger, then the history books would have included that as one of the greatest catches of all time. Just had to interject that because that's one thing that I truly remember from this ball game. And now we finally made it. Thank you guys so much. If you're listening up until this point and you've listened to every single episode, or if you're just listening to this episode, thank you so much. But we've made it to week 18 of the season. This has been the Bring the Sink podcast best views, or not best views, excuse me, the best games of the 2025-2026 season. And we finally made it to the 2026 portion of the season. Week 18, we had the Panthers going into Tampa Bay, in which the Tampa Bay Buccaneers beat the Panthers to force a very vital Saints-Falcons game on the next following day, as the Bucs beat the Panthers 16-14. And speaking of that vital matchup, we had the Saints going into Atlanta facing off against the Falcons, in which the Falcons broke the hearts of every Tampa Bay fan, in which they won 19-17. And Tyler Shough could not get it done for his colleagues out in the NFC South. It's crazy when you have to root for division rivals like this, but man, it's like that was such a crazy turn of events over these last couple of games, in which 3 teams ultimately ended up ending the season 8-9. And like I said earlier in this episode, if the Falcons had just beaten the Jets, all of this would have just not mattered at all, Oh man, we had the Browns beating the Bengals 20-18. Shedeur Sanders getting another victory added to his belt. Joe Burrow was not playing like Joe Burrow. He threw a pick 6. Myles Garrett had his record-breaking 23rd sack, in which the Bengals players were not happy about it because they paused the play for a while for him to celebrate with his teammates, which I've always thought that they've always done that. So I don't know what the big fuss was about, but maybe since they were playing in Cincinnati, that's not something that's really supposed to happen on opposing field. But I don't know. I mean, they paused the field in Houston when Peyton Manning broke the record. So I don't know. That was that was interesting for sure. You also had the Texans beating the Colts 38-30. Riley Leonard was actually having himself one hell of a ball game in this one. This was crazy. It's like, wow, maybe with a full season or a full offseason of practice, Riley Leonard could actually do some damage for the Indianapolis Colts. But yeah, ultimately they ended up losing 30-38. And I remember the big boy Togiai for the Texans ended up scoring a touchdown at the last second, as time expired. And I just love when teams score touchdowns as time expires. It's like, oh, we don't even have to kick the extra point because we already won, let's just let's go celebrate in the locker room, because it's like, what a way to end the season. You had the Lions beating the Bears 19-16, just an ultimate win for pride. The Lions and Dan Campbell beat the predecessor, beat the or I guess the apprentice. He beat the apprentice Ben Johnson twice. They're 2-0 against the Ben Johnson-led Bears this season. What an awesome season for the Bears, and not a great season for the Lions, but, the Lions always have that pride of beating Ben Johnson. So hopefully, or maybe not hopefully, maybe they will continue it next season. We'll see. I mean, I wouldn't say this is like one of the best like top 10 games of the season, but it's anytime you see a division rivalry and it's like a close game, it's like that's something to lock in on for sure. But honestly, I think the best game of this week 18 has to be when I scrolled all the way to the bottom and got kindly reminded the best game of this week 18 slate has to be Sunday Night Football, the last game of the season, of the regular season, in which the Ravens narrowly lost to the Steelers 26-24 in a winner-takes-all. Pretty much whoever wins this game gets to survive for another week, while the loser pretty much loses his head coaching job, and that's exactly what happened. John Harbaugh ended up getting fired right after this game after Tyler Loop missed the game-winning field goal to send the Ravens into the playoffs. It's like, has there ever been a more pressurized kick in the history of football in the regular season? Because I know there's been kicks to win the Super Bowl, but has there ever been more pressure on a kicker to make a kick in the regular season than Tyler Loop in that moment? Because my goodness, man, to send the team to the playoffs, if you lose, you're out of the playoffs. Your coach probably gets fired. It's like that poor guy, man. It's like I wouldn't wish that pressure on anybody. I will say that this game was awesome because we had 4 touchdowns scored in the fourth quarter, 2 by each team. You had the Ravens scoring a touchdown to make it 17-13 with about 8 minutes left in the ball game. Then you had the Steelers answering with their own drive and take back the lead 20-17, in which the Ravens then got the ball back again, scored another touchdown with a little over 2 minutes left. And this touchdown was awesome because it was like a deep pass left to Zay Flowers for 64 yards. And it was like, wow, like, where has Zay Flowers been all season long, man? Like, where has this been? Like, that was crazy. And then the Steelers got the ball back again and scored another touchdown off of a 26-yard FDR dime from Aaron Rodgers to Calvin Austin to put the Steelers up 26-24. And I know what you're thinking, like 26-24, wasn't it 20? Well, yeah, but they missed the extra point. They got it blocked. So the field goal wouldn't have been to tie it to go into overtime. The field goal would have sent the Ravens into the playoffs with a victory, hypothetical 27-26 victory. And sure enough, Tyler Loop could not get it done. And it's like that. Just I can still think about the moment that he kicked that ball. I was watching with my mom upstairs in the living room. I was watching it and I was like, wow, like this is a crazy moment. Let's see. And then he just completely whiffed on it. And Mike Tirico's like, the Steelers are making it to the playoffs. Like, they win the AFC North. I was like, oh my goodness, man. Like, what an absolute season. Just looking back at this season, this was one of the most legendary seasons that I think I've ever remembered in my entire life. And this season was one of the few seasons that I've ever had the NFL Sunday Ticket package. And I am so glad. I got NFL Sunday Ticket. This kind of showed me that I will never go another season without getting NFL Sunday Ticket. If you don't know me personally, then the way I do it is I have my big TV downstairs. I have my big TV, the main TV, hooked up to cable. So I'll watch whatever the game of the week is on that big TV. And then I roll in a side TV. I got a TV stand that's like on wheels. And I'll roll in my side TV, which is a little smaller. It's like 45, 48 inch or whatever. I'll roll it in side by side. I got Red Zone on the smaller TV, and then I got the game of the week on the bigger TV. And it was one of the most awesome, legendary viewing experiences. And I 10 out of 10 recommend. If you have 2 TVs and one of them is not being put to use, go on Amazon. It was like $40. Go on Amazon, get a rolling TV stand and change your life this upcoming football season, because my goodness, man, just I've always heard of people like making fun of each other, like, oh, you seem like a one TV guy for football season. And I never understood what they meant up until I started watching it for myself and watching multiple games all at the same time. It's like, it's not even overstimulating at all. It's like perfectly stimulating because it's like, oh, all right, that play is incomplete or that pass is incomplete. Let's look over to the side TV. Oh, whoa, he scored an 80-yard touchdown, and that definitely helped me, kind of build my football knowledge. And not only that, but like keep track and watch almost every single game every single week, and this was the most I've ever watched football in my entire life. And I've always been a huge football fan, but actually taking the initiative to watch all of this football, it definitely paid off. And now I have a podcast in which I can talk about football. And I think just watching all of those games and then listening to all of the analysis throughout the week definitely makes me at least somewhat qualified. I mean, who really is qualified at the end of the day? But at least it makes me somewhat qualified to kind of talk about these games, what I remember, and kind of give you my analysis and my opinions and my good takes, my not so good takes. So thank you guys so much for listening to episode 15 of the Bring the Sink podcast. I'm your host, The Hammer. The next episode is not confirmed yet, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to be going over the top free agent targets, not for every team, but just like the top free agent targets from each skill position. Maybe I'll go into like offensive line, defensive line. We'll see. But yeah, I think I'm going to do free agents. I know it's not necessarily a sexy topic, but we're in the barren depths of the off season. I don't really want to talk about the NBA. I guess we could talk about the Olympics, but for the most part, maybe we'll discuss the free agents. Anyway, I'm your host, The Hammer, and thank you guys so much again for listening. Please like, comment, follow, and subscribe. Peace!